that I might make merry with my friends. But when, he doesn't even call him my brother. He says, when this son of yours come home, he's devoured your living with harlots. You killed for him the fatted calf. And there's a point here that most people have not pointed out. This young man was received back to his place as the son of the father. He never got back his inheritance. It says, son, he's talking about the older son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. The point I'd like to make is this, is twofold. Friends, if you are the prodigal son, and you come back to God, your sonship is restored. Fellowship is restored. Many privileges of the household are restored. But what you could have been if you had never gone to the far country is not restored. There are things which are lost and lost forever. This young man had given up the third of his inheritance, and his father respected this deal, and he said to the older son, everything I have is yours. The third, which the younger son had taken and gone, was gone forever, no longer belonged in the estate, and he was not restored back to his 1/3 of the estate. He was restored back to sonship, restored back to fellowship, but that which he was squandered, which he had squandered, was not returned to him. And he said, it is fitting to make merry and be glad. And instead of saying my son, he insists that the older brother recognize your brother. It was dead. He's alive. He was lost. He's found. And you ought to rejoice in that fact. I think we've made the points we wish to make. So we'll proceed now to a parable about the right use of wealth. The parable about an unrighteous steward. We're now in Luke 16, and we are going to read verses 1 through 4.
He said also to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a steward, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his goods. And he called him and said to him, what is this that I hear about you? Turn in the account of your stewardship, for you can no longer be my steward. And the steward said to himself, what shall I do, since my master is taking the stewardship away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do, so that people may receive me into their houses when I am put out of the stewardship.
Now, this is a very common thing in our own day. Our corporate system in America means that a great many of our stores, our businesses, our factories are in the control of professional managers. They constitute a special class of their own. They are hired originally, we assume, by stockholders. But at the present time in the large corporations where the stockholders are many and there's no one person who has a controlling interest, it isn't very long before these managers are able to take advantage of their position and devote themselves enormous salaries. Some of these corporations have executives that devote themselves $500,000, $750,000 a year, counting their bonuses. They do this not because this is the will of the stockholders, but because they've been given the stewardship. And here's a steward who is wasting his master's goods. There are those who accuse certain corporations of the stewards of not giving money back to the stockholders. They spend it on themselves, on expense accounts and high salaries and special options and so on. In this case, the owner is a majority stockholder and can call this man to account. And the fellow knows he's been dishonest. He said, I've got to use my remaining days to prepare for the days when I'm not a steward. And so he goes out and he does some very interesting things. Read verse 5 down through verse 7.
So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he said to the first, how much do you owe my master? He said, 100 measures of oil. And he said to him, take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. And then he said to another, how much do you owe? He said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said to him, take your bill and write 80.
In other words, he's trying to make friends of these people who owed his master by cutting down what they owe him while he still has authority and power of attorney. And he reduces these debts. His hope is that he'll put these men under obligation to him, and when he no longer has a job of his own, he can come to them and say, listen, friend, I helped you, now you help me, I'm out of a job, and you've got to take care of me. Now the point in verse 8 has bothered a great many people. They feel that Jesus here is complimenting a dishonest man. Jesus in his story said, the master commended the dishonest steward for his prudence, and then Jesus makes this statement: the sons of this world are wiser in their own generation than the sons of light. Now, that's a miserable actual statement. That the people of God would not have as much sense as the people of the world. Because the people of the world at least look ahead a few years. They lay up for the future. Jesus wants us to lay up for eternity. He talks here about the people who are preparing for old age in this life as being wise in their own generation, but not for eternity. The children of God should be wise for eternity. He says in verse 9, I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous mammon. Because in verse 9, it's going to fail. When it fails, and it's going to fail, money's going to fail, they may receive you, that is, those in glory, the angels, may receive you into the eternal habitations. Now, it's not been too many years ago since we had gold coinage in America. And then we called in the gold, but we had silver coinage. And then we got to the place that we have debased coinage, in which we have put cheaper metals into our so-called quarters and half dollars. And as a result, of course, there are very few real half dollars or quarters in circulation today. If they are, it's by error. Now, they are now beginning to take our salaries and to transmit them directly to the bank. A letter costs 13 cents to mail. It costs the envelope. It costs the paper it's written on. Instead of that, they can electronically spin this from one disk onto another by computer, and you can have your income transferred. As I said to a friend of mine the other day, these wheels spin, and your entire bank account, your life savings, become a blip, a little electronic impulse on a spinning disk. What's going to happen if somebody stops the disk someday? You don't have a thing in the world. You don't have a dime. You don't have a piece of paper even. All you've got is a blip that if the computer ran would give you a printout of how much you have. If the computer doesn't work, the electricity goes off, you don't have anything. And Jesus talks about the time when unrighteous mammon is going to fail, and you ought to have sense enough to use your money so it goes ahead of you, and it prepares for you a place in eternity. And I would ask you seriously now, with a smile on my face, but I would ask you sincerely, how much of your money do you have sent ahead of you as compared to how much you'll leave behind when you leave? John D. Rockefeller has become a symbol, of course, of immense wealth. And while now there are people in this generation who are more wealthy than he was, he still remains the symbol of wealth in the minds of a lot of people. And when he passed from this life, as all of us will someday, somebody said, how much do you suppose he left? And a friend said, listen, like all the rest of us, he left it all. He left it all. And the Bible tells us that naked we came into this world, and naked shall we return. And we're going to leave it all but what you sent ahead of you. Jesus said, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. How much treasure do you have there that's no longer a blip on a spinning disk in a computer system? When the computers quit, when the banks fail, when the money is worthless, how much will you have left? As a boy, I collected stamps, and I have stamps in that collection. One of them is marked 5 Pfennig from over in Germany, and across the face of this was surcharged 5 million Pfennig. In other words, what would have bought a house before inflation? It would cost to buy a window pane for that house after inflation. There were brokerage houses in New York, the offices of which were papered with German paper money, because per square inch the money was worth less than wallpaper.